It's been nearly 6 months since the release of Pokemon Legends ZA, and I remember on launch week seeing many tweets mentioning the ugly textures, laziness of Game Freak, Lumio City looking like a ghost town in many instances. YouTube wasn't any different as well, with videos saying that the game was complete utter trash. In other words, people were calling the game shit and saying that it wasn't worth the $60 to $70 price tag depending on which version of the game you got. So I eventually ended up asking myself, was the game truly that bad? Early March, I picked up the game and started playing it, and after 30 hours of grinding and playing through the game, I have a lot to say about this game and what I think of it overall. So sit down, relax, and hey, why not subscribe to the channel before we start, as I'm trying to hit 200 subs soon. One last thing, I am not going to be talking about the Mega Dimensions DLC since I do not have that. Now, unless you guys would be willing to give me $30, then I won't be playing it at all. So with that out of the way, let's take a deep dive into Pokemon Legends ZA. You start off with a character creator, being able to change your hairstyle, hair color, eyebrows. Not a lot to work with so far, but hopefully there are more hairstyles you can choose in the barbershop as you unlock more stuff, right? Anyways, I create my character and set off to begin the game. You start the game on a train waiting to arrive at Lumio City. Just to imagine the concept of a Legends game taking place in Lumios for a second, and it ends up looking like a steaming pile of garbage in the final game. More on that later, but as we arrive, here is where I can talk about an initial concern I had prior to picking up the game. Now, the main thing I was unsure of was the performance, or if the game would run well at all, since the Switch is a dinosaur at this point in its lifespan, so I was hoping that the game would at least run smooth. I'd like to preface that I played on the Switch 1 version of the game, so unfortunately no 4K 60fps Switch 2 edition, whereas the Switch 1 runs on 1080p 30fps. When it came to the performance, I personally had minimal issues with game performance in general. I was nervous about playing ZA on Switch 1 because when Scarlet Violet came out, that was a disaster to say the least, but to my knowledge, there were few issues that I had on ZA's performance that I know of based off of my 30 hours of playtime. There may have been some slight hiccups from rogue battles or a lot of things happening on screen, but general gameplay was consistent, and I'm relieved that ZA was at least able to run at a rock solid 30fps on the Switch 1. I primarily played docked mode and sometimes on handheld mode as well. Handheld mode ran well considering some battles may be intense. While the performance is good in this game, the visuals are a different story. It's no surprise that Pokemon Legends ZA looks a bit on the bland side. I can at least admit that the character models look well with their clothing and especially the hair. The interiors to certain buildings look quite nice, such as the Rust Syndicate building and Hotel Z. Pokemon models look pretty good along with their Mega Evolved forms, and that's all of the positives I can say about the visuals. The buildings are flat with no windows, no balconies, or people hanging around in the building. The buildings themselves don't really look that good. It's just a bunch of flat textures. There are many flat textures found throughout the game. Visually, the game looks fine at best, but there's a lot that just does not look good in this game and doesn't really blend well. Even on the Switch 2, which the Switch 2 has a better resolution and frame rate, but it still looks similar from the Switch 1. I haven't even started the game yet, so let's get to that. I arrive at Lumio City, and while at the train station, you head straight to Lumios and end up meeting this girl called Tawny. I'll get into her later and the rest of the characters. We see a presentation of this company, which is the game's version of Welcome to the World of Pokemon intro. It's cool, I guess, but again, no voice acting in this game is bizarre, and I get that people have been bitching for voice acting in Pokemon games for years, and it's totally not like Game Freak has millions upon millions of dollars at the ready. No, they're just an indie studio, so we should allow them to continuously charge us $60 for their unfinished slop. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, but at the very least, have voice acting for pre-rendered cutscenes. Anyways, we notice that a Pancham robs my bag, and we're forced to catch him while starting an excruciatingly slow tutorial. Once we reach the bag, it's finally our time to pick the starter Pokemon. These starter options suck. Look, I get that you wanted new Mega starters, but you could have chosen Snivy, in which Superior could have had a cooler Mega form than whatever the hell Meganium's is. I'm fine with Totodile, he does look cute, and it's a good water option. 2 Johto starters is an interesting choice. You could have at least had Cyndaquil instead of Tepig, but I understand why, and it's for 2 reasons. Since the tutorial takes a few hours to get through before you start exploring it, I'll go ahead and make a dedicated segment to it. The tutorial and Legends ZA is so fucking slow, like oh my god. It's painfully slow, and it's been like this throughout the franchise for years. Why is there never an option to skip the tutorial and get right to exploring Lumio City? I understand that tutorials must be a thing in video games, which that's fine, but don't make the tutorial like 3 to 4 hours. You can't explore Lumios at all during the tutorial because Tawny is pretty much holding your hand with a tight grip. You're forced to follow a strict path until about completing 3 side quests, which are required to get through the story. You also learn about Malba, a former Team Flare member that provides you rewards in exchange for helping her out with her research, which ranges from catching Pokemon, evolving them, filling out the Pokédex, and such. There's the rogue battles, which I have some things to say about, but I want to cover each of these things one by one, so I'm going to speed through the rest of the tutorial and talk about the other things that the game teaches you, such as the wild stones, rolling, using Pokemon in real-time combat, all of that stuff. But I'd like to take the time to get into the general gameplay of Legends ZA. The general gameplay of Pokemon Legends ZA is pretty good, and throughout most of my playthrough I was having a good time. Catching Pokemon in the wild zones is a cool idea, and it works in the Legends games. Pokemon battles in this game are exciting and fresh thanks to the new combat system implemented, and more on that later. The game controls well, and as I mentioned earlier, it runs well on the Switch One, making it for a smooth experience with a few slight hiccups here and there, but it's nothing too crazy. Running around at the rooftops is a cool idea, maybe having more access to areas that house different Pokemon, and it works. Pokemon can be found all throughout Lumio City for you to fight and catch. The battle system in Legends ZA is pretty good. I love the real-time combat of ZA with carefully timing your moves to get the most out of them. In ZA, there's no limit to using moves. Instead, they are automatically charged up, and along with that, the stronger the move, the longer it can take to recharge said move. You lock onto a Pokemon while holding ZL, then using an attack based off of which button it is assigned to. It makes the combat engaging for the player to use, and it could lead to some interesting battles or builds. The combat in this game is similar to that of Xenoblade Chronicles, where it is also real-time combat and strategy. Some attacks in the game also have an area of effect thing going on. You can literally dodge attacks by moving around. Speaking of that, you can move around the battle and your Pokemon follows you, which is how you're able to dodge attacks in the first place. If you stay still, you'll get your shit rocked, so it's best to constantly be on the move when the opportunity shows up. Healing up is a little different in this game, as you can't spam heal like in the main series. After healing up a Pokemon, you must wait a brief period before you can heal again. This also applies to curing status effects such as paralysis or poison. It adds a nice balance to the game by forcing you to fight carefully so you don't become overly reliant on healing or being able to cheese through the game. Plus moves are also a thing in this game and are stronger versions of standard moves. They add fuel to your Mega Evolution energy as well. You learn them automatically as you level up, so there is no certain amount of work you have to do. All you have to do is just progress through the story and you should unlock plus moves. The combat makes battles much shorter, which is a godsend compared to spamming the A button in the main series. Unfortunately, we'll likely have to go back to that in the Winds and Waves whenever that releases. But as for the Legends games, I appreciate that they're trying something new for the combat. I think this is what the combat should be in the Legends games going forward, with ZA being the foundation of that. I really like what they did here with the combat, going for the real-time combat approach and some Xenoblade Chronicles stuff mixed in there. I hope for the next Legends game they keep this combat system and build off of it. Speaking of Pokemon battles, the ZA Royale is something that has the idea to be really cool, but later on it becomes more and more of a chore. Allow me to explain. The ZA Royale is a competition of which trainer can rise to A rank. And since we are new to Lumio City, we start from the very bottom at rank Z. You earn points through taking down trainers in Pokemon battles, and once you earn enough points, you will then earn a promotion ticket. These are required because you need them to do promotion battles. Once you are prepared, you can now fight your opponent who is also fighting to rank up. Once you defeat the trainer, you can then rank up to the next rank. You do this process all over again for the next rank. It isn't too bad at first, but later on it becomes a bit much of a chore, especially in the mid game. The battle zones themselves, similar to the wild zones, are a small part of Lumio City. Now, instead of encountering wild Pokemon, you run into trainers. Now, the main selling point about the battle zones is that you can sneak up on other Pokemon trainers using an ambush tactic. Other trainers can also catch you lacking as well, giving them the advantage to attack your Pokemon, while yours is caught off guard, preventing it from attacking for a brief period of time. It's not as punishing because they get to use one one move for free, and unless your Pokemon has a 4x weakness, then for the most part you won't be punished too badly. Catching trainers off guard is generally pretty easy, and it makes battles much shorter thanks to the combat. There's obstacles and bushes for you to hide in. The way it's triggered is by attacking the trainer's Pokemon and with your Pokemon, and that starts the battle. The trainers are only programmed to spot your character model and not your Pokemon model, and as you progress in the ranks, they eventually start to use Mega Evolve Pokemon in these battles more frequently, but by that point your team should be pretty stacked by them, so it doesn't become too much of an issue. I did briefly mention the promotion battles earlier, so I'll go into more detail. These are fights with unique characters that are chosen by the competition organizers. For ranks Z through V, you rank up like normal, fighting a promotion battle. This is the early game, so I was breezing through these no problem. Once you fight Vinny, the game does something interesting that I honestly thought was pretty neat, and that was when you defeated Vinny, you didn't rank up to rank U, but instead you jumped all the way to F rank. You jumped about 15 ranks up from V, and I thought it was pretty cool seeing that because I was not willing to grind up 26 ranks to get to rank A. It still made the game grindier regardless, because once you're at this point of the story, you do a lot more battling just to unlock promotion tickets, whether it's story battles or fighting megas, so on. The interesting thing is that at a certain point you unlock the Mega Stone, so some battles may become a bit challenging, but once you're past F rank, you'll fight trainers of different kinds. For example, you may fight Kanari, who specializes in electric Pokemon, Ivor in fighting Pokemon, and Jacinthe in fairy types. I do like that there is a promotion battle required to advance further into the ladder. It makes rank ups feel more satisfying to unlock rather than if you were to simply get enough points to advance to the next rank. Some of these fights were really good, and I enjoyed a certain part of the game, which was a tournament featuring multiple characters that you fought throughout the game, and I thought that was done well. I wish they had more stuff like that, and I think the ZA Royale grind can become a chore, so the main complaints I had with it were how grindy it was in the mid to late game regarding trying to get points for promotion matches. I'm not saying it's completely bad, but I think it's decent for me, and it could have been a lot better is what I'm saying. At a certain point of the game, you unlock the ability to use Mega Evolution, and this comes the introduction of a new way to fight Pokemon, Rogue Mega Evolve Pokemon. Long name, I know, but these fights are an exciting change of pace to go through. There's multiple things you must keep in check, and some of these do provide a challenge as well. In Rogue battles, you are allied with one of the 3 party members, Tawny, Naveen, and Lita. They have their own Mega that they can use in these bosses. When fighting a Rogue Pokemon, there's a gauge at the bottom right of the screen. That is your Mega Evolution energy, and once it fills up, you can Mega Evolve your Pokemon. Now, the Rogue Pokemon doesn't take much damage when not using a Mega Evolve Pokemon. Plus moves can damage it, and Mega Evolve moves as well, meaning that once you have a Mega, you can unleash all hell with the right setup. And that setup for me was just simply using Swords Dance with my Heracross and going ham. No, seriously, Swords Dance is so broken. Using Megas, of course, has a time limit, as you obviously can use it forever. However, you can stall its energy usage by swapping your Mega out, and this is quite helpful as it adds an element of strategy. You can reserve your Mega for when you absolutely need it to get a lot of damage in, and with that extends how long you can keep your Mega active for. Even if you run out of Mega energy, you can gain it right back thanks to the Mega Shards that the bosses drop when dealing damage to them, so you can get right back into the action without much worry. Similar to the main battles, you can't spam heal and have a cooldown for healing Pokemon. Again, I think this is a good addition to keep the balance of the combat. There are multiple Rogue Megas you fight, which can be some old Mega Pokemon and some new Mega Pokemons that are introduced in ZA. You also must not only watch out for your Pokemon's health, but your own as well. You can tell how much HP you have by the overlay on your screen, from a little hurt to pretty much being on life support. In these fights, there are 2 phases. The normal phase, in which it's attacking you normally and doing its standard attacks. However, once you get it down to half health, that's when it becomes hyper aggressive on the player. It starts to charge up attacks more often, and I think there attack patterns change up a little bit too. There are 2 charges, the normal charge and the ultimate charge. The normal charge is one that you cannot prevent, and each boss has a unique charge attack and ultimate. You get far away so you can dodge it, but your Pokemon may also be damaged from this. So what I did was return my Pokemon to its Pokeball and waited until the attack was over, and then got right back into fighting the boss. These attacks aren't the most difficult to dodge, but for the later ones they can be a little tricky to get through. The ultimate attack is a version of a charge charge that launches the Pokemon's strongest move. Thankfully, this can be prevented by dealing enough damage towards it, but otherwise, you have an unavoidable attack that can kill your run. I did end up dying a few times because of this, and fortunately, the game does give you an option to continue fighting it where you left off, and even if you don't want that, you can restart the fight from the very beginning, so it's not forced on you. Even then, considering how bulky some of these fights can get, I'll take the option of continuing where I left off. I think these rogue bosses with the ultimate attacks and the charge attack, it adds challenge and gets you to play very careful while attacking the boss with your Pokemon. Some of them weren't that fun, like the Mega Banette where its whole phantom chase it does, and Mega Halucha's dive where it automatically gets you to low HP. You must maintain a certain distance so you can lock onto the boss and attack it that way. Speaking of that, that's the only way the camera zooms out in these fights. The camera doesn't zoom out for these fights automatically, and it can make for some moments where you don't even know that a trap is there, or you don't even know what's happening on the screen, or even if a boss attacks you directly. The camera can be a pain to deal with at times, but I still had fun with these mega battles. They add a new level of combat to what I thought was already good, and it kept it exciting. Now, I think these would be a lot better if you could have these online and play with friends. I think it would be such a cool thing to do these with friends, whether it's in the story mode or online multiplayer. Similar to the combat of Legend ZA, I appreciate them trying to do something new in these games, and I think rogue mega bosses are an exciting thing. They could be a lot better, but I think this was a good thing, and I hope they do more stuff like this going forward. The only complaints I had with them were the camera being a bit annoying to deal with at times, and that there were a bit too many for my liking in the main story, with a total of 17, not including the DLC. I think maybe 10 to 12 would have been the perfect amount before they started to become stale, but I think the Mega Rogue battles are exciting as a whole. Now, since this game was based off Gen 6, the Mega Evolution returned, and with that came new Mega Evolved Pokemon designs. Some of them I thought were really cool and had an interesting design. Some were okay, and others were just complete trash. As for the starter Pokemon Megas, I think they're a letdown. Mega Feraligatr just doesn't look that cool, and sure it does have the whole Totodile head when it doesn't attack, but it still didn't look that good for me when it's idle. Mega Meganiums looks like shit. I'm not a Chikorita fan and never have been, and I thought maybe the Mega would at least give it a chance to redeem itself, but unfortunately they just slapped more flowers on its neck, so it doesn't look good. I think Mega Emboar looks fine. The whole stick it's holding is pretty cool, and the extra flames give it a nice upgrade, but I still think it could have been a lot better. It looks decent for me. There were ones that I really liked, such as Mega Halucha, the Kalos Trio, Mega Scolipede, Mega Excragil, and a few more I'll put up on screen to boot. I think my favorite new Mega is definitely Mega Phalanx. It looks really cute, and I like that it tries to give a different look, and again, it's just really cute and cool at the same time. The ones that I thought were decent or okay were Mega Chandelure, Mega Victreebel, and a couple others I'll put up on screen to name. I don't think they're bad per se, but the design could have been better, considering that some of them were just fine, but the design could have been better, especially Chandelure, where they just made it a bigger chandelier. Mega Dragonite is also an example of this, because I have mixed thoughts towards how I'm supposed to feel regarding his design. I do get that it looks cute, and that it's not really meant to be an intimidating looking design, but I also think the design is lazy, so I'm mixed regarding it. The ones that I think were straight up bad were, like I said before, Mega Meganium and Mega Feraligatr, as well as Mega Starmie, Mega Clefable, Mega Lucario Z, and Mega Pyroar. Especially Pyroar, like what the hell were they cooking with this design here? Starmie as well, because it looks like that thing from Earthbound. I think the new Megas as a whole are solid. There are more good designs than bad designs, and I'm glad there are new Mega Evolution Pokemon, which is great, and it was exciting to see the new designs for the first time. But Flygon gets done dirty again, Krokorok could have had a cool Mega as well. I'd be going on and on about Pokemon that I thought should have gotten Megas. Some of the Pokemon that did end up getting a new Mega design did raise an eyebrow for me. That was a brief tangent on what I thought about the Mega designs, and overall they're mostly good with a few bad apples here and there. I do want to take some time away from the actual game and briefly talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack in Pokemon Legends ZA is really good. I like the overworld music that plays when walking around Lumio City in both day and nighttime. The battle theme is pretty good, but notably the Mega Rogue Pokemon theme, Jacinthi's theme, Canari's theme were all really good tracks since they give me some kind of adrenaline and I was invested in the game at times. A good way to describe the battle themes is that it hit like crack. Pokemon delivers once again in the soundtrack department. I thought the composers did a really good job for the soundtrack of Legends ZA, and I'm glad that one of the things Pokemon gets right consistently is the soundtrack, because in Legends ZA the OST is stellar. I can always appreciate good soundtracks in video games, especially because I'm using tracks from ZA in this video too. So that's all I wanted to say about the soundtrack, so we'll get right back into the game. So the main selling point of Legends ZA is that you get to explore Lumio City, and from the trailer I was like, okay, this seems really cool. I understand that Lumio City was tiny due to the limitations of the 3DS, so when ZA got announced, I was interested in what they would do with Lumio City. They massacred my boy here. What the hell is this? You have Lumio City based on Paris, France, and this ghost town is the best you can come up with? I understand why it was limited on the 3DS, but this is the Switch, and we've seen better from this console. Mario Odyssey's New Donk City, Xenoblade 3 City, Breath of the Wild towns. Now, I feel like there's some dumb fuck out there that's like, well, Pokemon isn't going to be as ambitious as Mario, Zelda, or Xenoblade. And to that I say, bitch, I paid $60 US for this. The nightlife is even worse. Like, Lumios feels so lifeless here. It's like they didn't even bother trying. Why not have jazz clubs you can visit? How about street music performers, cars going about? Why not have battles you can see in the middle of the day or night? Go on boat rides in the river. They spam cafes across the map to make it look like there's a lot of places to visit, but no. There are stores to buy clothes or get a haircut, but they turn into screens instead. Moving on, what Lumio City has to offer, aside from the wild zones, which are also just parts of Lumio City lazily taken and reused as wild areas, more on that later, you can run from one end to Lumio City to the next in a few minutes, so that's cool, I guess. There are some buildings you can walk into and they look nice. Exploring Lumios itself is pretty boring, and like I said before, the nightlife is a letdown. You think there would be a hustling city at night, but it's just as empty as it is in the daytime. I understand that this may seem like nitpicking, which, well, it is, but I have to keep bringing up that this game costs $60 or $70 if you're on the Switch too, so I should expect a high level of quality, in which the aspect of Lumio City is not. It's a pretty huge letdown considering that most of the city is just coffee shops or cafes, stores that are menus, and another thing you can do in Lumio City is side quests. Side quests you can do, which I thought some were actually pretty cool, like this one where you climb through a bunch of obstacle courses to get a Froakie. I thought that was actually pretty cool. Then the more side quests I did, the more I realized that these are basically just fetch quests, and once I realized that, I didn't bother doing any further side quests and just focused on progressing to the main story. They add very little to the game and they're just a grind and tedious. In this game, you can change what your character looks like, obviously through hairstyles, clothing, and whatnot. Dear God, what are these options? Now look, I'm not one to be huge on character customization, but we're in the big 2026 and this is the best Game Freak could give us? I mean, really? Visiting the barbershop, I was curious to see if there would be a lot more options. Turns out there weren't, so I thought, okay, maybe you unlock more as you progress through the game, which makes sense. But nope, I beat the game and there's still barely any new options. What you see is what you get. There's a reason most of my footage has my character wearing a hat, because I think the default hairstyle doesn't look good. It's so bad that the game gives you a hat to wear in the early game because the hair design fucking sucks. And if you like it, cool, more power to you. I personally don't like the options that they give you here. It's like they didn't even try to have more than 20 unique hairstyles in my game that is $60 by the way. So I just said screw it and wore a hat for the rest of the game, and the hair looks pretty good when you're wearing a hat, so it worked out for me in the end. But this bullshit better not happen in winds and waves. You can shop for clothes as well, and I thought there was a decent selection you can pick from. I started off with the Team MZ sweater and thought the color was bad and that Naveen's jacket looked way cooler than mine, so I ended up wearing this brown jacket and pants and I thought it looked good. Again, I'm not huge on character customizations, but I think the selection of clothes was fine and the hair selection was not very good. Now, since the game takes place in a small Lumio city that's lifeless, wild zones are scattered throughout the city. There are 20 wild zones once you beat the game, and these are parts of Lumio City converted into a wild zone that has green hollow walls to ensure that Pokemon don't get out. In each wild zone there are Pokemon you can catch, in which you'll see them out in the open. Like in Legends Arceus, you can catch them without having to battle them with throwing the ball behind the Pokemon to have a higher catch rate. Most Pokemon generally can be caught using this method. Sometimes you may have to battle them to catch them, but something you may not know is when wiping out a Pokemon in Legends EA, they don't die right away. Instead, there's a brief moment where they'll be dizzy, and that gives you the opportunity to catch them again. If the Pokemon escapes from the Pokeball, it will faint and you missed a chance to catch it. But while that Pokemon is dizzy, instead what you can do is save your game and reload in to try to catch that Pokemon again. This is super helpful for catching certain Pokemon that may spawn in rarely. For instance, I use this method to catch a Gumi and eventually add it to my team to make it a Gudra. Getting back to the wild zones, most of them are not interesting at all. Like I said before, they're areas of Lumio City slapped with green walls. The one thing that is unique to them is having these Pokemon mini bosses with glowing red eyes. I think they're called Alpha Pokemon, and these are neat mini bosses which you can fight as they are a bit bulky. The cool thing about them is that you can catch them and use them on your team. Hell, my Crocodile has the symbol, as you can see. Now, these aren't as terrifying as the ones in Legends Arceus because I always try to avoid them in that game. However, in ZA, they don't seem as threatening and they kind of just are there. So there is a good chance that you may never end up fighting them. I don't think the wild zones are a bad idea, but there's a lot more you could have done with a wild zone than what we got in the final game. I think the context of Legends EA, this can work as it's not a bad way to have wild Pokemon scattered around. It's a cool concept, just underwhelming execution. This is pretty obvious, so I'll keep it short. As you know, there's pretty much nothing to do in Lumio City outside of battling in wild zones. The lack of a proper day and night cycle bothers me because why do I have to sit through a damn loading screen just for the sky to become a different color and not much changes in Lumio City? Scarlet and Violet had a normal day and night cycle, and you may be thinking, well, it's not that big of a deal for a day and night cycle to be dealt with through loading screens. It may seem like it doesn't affect you much, but you could literally be fighting a wild Pokemon and the game fucks you over through that by forcing you to sit through a loading screen because Game Freak was too lazy to make an auto day and night cycle. There's also the lack of hairstyles, lack of any animations in the story with constantly spamming fade to black or fade to white, putting flat textures on buildings, padding out game length, and a whole lot more. But again, I'd be here for over an hour talking about how lazy Game Freak was at making Lumio City and all of that stuff, but just know I do acknowledge the issues that Game Freak didn't really work on. It was just lazily done. I wanted to save this part of the game up for last because I thought the story was okay in Legends EA. It's not necessarily a bad story, and I know Pokemon stories aren't supposed to be the end all or be all thing in the Pokemon series, but I found myself not liking it in certain parts because of how little happens in the mid game, for example. While I think the early game, barring the tutorial, was good, you know, getting settled into the world of Lumio City despite what I said about it earlier. So what I'll go through is the parts that I liked and the parts that I didn't like. I haven't really talked about the group members of Team MZ much in the video, and that's because aside from battling and the story, there's not much else to them. Not that they're bad characters, but I just felt that they didn't do much with them outside the story. I think Naveen, for instance, can be an interesting character because he's into fashion and he makes clothes or designs them. So what could have worked was, you know, going into depth about it. Maybe he opens up a shop, maybe you can commission him to do some work or design your own, you know, hoodie, something like that, but they don't really do that. Lita is a dancer and she usually prepares meetings and all that. Tani is supposed to be the leader of Team MZ, but it's really you, so it doesn't really matter. There was one point of the game where you were required to fight Tani to proceed through the story, and in that context, if you won against her, you would go into Prism Tower. Now mind you, this is the end game, so I'm just trying to beat the game, but the game instead pulls a middle finger and basically wasted your time, so that was fun. The parts that I did enjoy was the Canary quiz thing. I thought it was a pretty neat distraction. I loved the Jacinthe Plan tournament, but it was held back because Game Freak thought it would be a brilliant idea to force you to get through rogue battles and a whole bunch of filler stuff to finally be able to participate in the actual tournament itself. This is why I said there were too many rogue battles and it was this part of the game, because again, I really enjoyed the Jacinthe tournament and thought it was great, but the pace of it was not good. I think Lysander coming back was pretty cool, and that he would occasionally show up. And it was also quite nice exploring the abandoned hideout of Team Flare. My only complaint about it is that I wish it wasn't such a small part in the game at the very end, but it was still pretty cool going back to Team Flare's hideout. The characters were fine in the game. Naveen was my favorite member in the main group. The rest were alright. Some of them had challenging fights, so they were memorable. I did say the rogue battles were exciting earlier, and they did start to get boring after doing it for the 15th time, so that's why I mentioned there should have been less bosses, mainly because I felt that it was just Game Freak padding out game length. But it took me 25 hours to beat the main story, and I felt that there were some parts of the story that were clearly padding out game length, specifically the Ivor fight to rank up. That was stupid, you know, exploring the sewers with Emma. I just didn't really like that part of the game because of how tedious it felt. There was also the part where Tani got into some scam. It wasn't bad, but it dragged on for some time. The end game was pretty good with the Prism Tower turning into some weird creature. I thought that was good, and I wish they could have gone inside Prism Tower, but Game Freak said fuck you and you don't ever go inside the Prism Tower ever, so that's cool, I guess. The final boss was decent with fighting two flower things and showing off Mega Zygarde, and that was badass, I can't even lie. I thought the story was fine, but there were some parts I just really didn't like going through, so yeah. I think the story could have been better, and the lack of Velshall and Xerneas is pretty damning considering that they could have played a pivotal role in the story, but I guess not. I honestly felt like Game Freak just forgot to put them in the story. I haven't really found them in the game. They might be a post-game Pokemon, but as of recording, I haven't really touched much upon the post-game. So that was a really long video on Pokemon Legends ZA, and overall I think ZA is a decent game. I personally enjoyed playing through it and had a good time. While there are many issues I had with this game that I went through, despite it all, I was still able to have a good time. I enjoyed the general gameplay of it and thought it was good. If I had to give this game a rating, it would be a 7 out of 10. This game has some good qualities, but there's a lot of stuff that needed a lot of time in the oven and that it held back the game. The game feels half-baked for a majority of it, and this game could have been a lot more, but it's still a fine game. Now, would I pay $60 for this game? Hell no. But I think the game can be fun. It's frustrating seeing Game Freak cut corners time and time again, and it really pisses me off because there's so much potential behind this game, considering the combat was fun, the rogue battles were exciting, and all of that. I don't really know the best way to describe the ZA experience because it's honestly all over the place with the positives and negatives for me. It's a bizarre game for what it is, and that's really all I have to say about the game. If you ended up making it this far, I thank you for sitting through my video. I would appreciate it if you liked this video, as it would help out the channel greatly. And hey, if you want more videos like this, where I make video essay style reviews of games, why not subscribe to the channel and stay posted on updates. Anyway, that is all, so thank you again for watching, and as always, enjoy yourselves and have a good one.